Here in Philadelphia, our stadiums feel like home. Earlier this year, we covered the demolition of Veterans Stadium. This week, in 2010, a ceremony was held to formally begin demolition of the Spectrum. Hall of Famers Bernie Perrant, Bobby Clark, and Julius Erving all spoke at the event to honor the home of the Sixers and the Flyers for 30-plus years. During its tenure, the Spectrum was known for holding 10 NHL and NBA titles, as well as 2 All-Star games, both in the year 1976, the same year that they hosted the NCAA Final Four.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, Josh Abrams. With me today to talk Flyers is Tyler Small and Siobhan Nolan. Thank you for joining me today, guys. We're going to get right into Flyers talk. And I said before the show started that the Flyers are really starting to flyer it up now. They are 10-7-4. They have fallen back to 5th place in the Metro Division. They didn't get off to necessarily a hot start per se, but it was an encouraging start where you go into Prague and win. You come back and win at home against the Devils. And, you know, for whatever reason, guys, this Flyers team is just really starting to enjoy playing more hockey. And not just like, obviously, more games, but more time.
Yeah.
It's 60 minutes in a hockey game. They're playing 65 and plus beyond that.
Yeah, and it just comes down to third period execution. I mean, I would go as far as saying that at home they started the season very hot. I think last episode I said it was amazing how they were 6-1-2 at the time, and then recently I haven't been able to, especially in that Islanders game, blowing a 3-0 lead in the third period. Obviously not ideal, but that just comes down to knowing the players that you have on the ice. I mean, we're going to talk about some of the call-ups they have recently with Frost and Forby earlier, but just having those young guys that haven't been there for late game execution, especially with the new head coach, it's going to take a little while to iron out those little details and to make those wins that necessarily have to be wins at home.
Yeah, and I think our run in November especially was really impressive, save for that Florida game. But I think November's been a really promising thing. Those call-ups have really been proving to be pretty beneficial. So I think there is progress being made. It's just we have a couple of inconsistencies, but.
Right, and I think one of those inconsistencies has to be the play of our veterans. And we talk about this with the Flyers every time. It's like they have an array of guys that have been in the league for 7, 8, 9 years, veterans in the NHL. They know their way around the league. And then on the other side, they have a bunch of young guys that are in their 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th year at the most in the league. They're starting to get used to the National Hockey League, and they seem to be adapting pretty well. This season, more than the past couple of seasons that we've seen with the Flyers, I feel like our veterans and the guys that have been on this team for so long that have seen coaching change after coaching change, they're just not adapting right now, and it certainly doesn't show in the stat sheet on the box score. But what is it to you guys that you guys think is the issue with our older players?
I think it's with the coaching change, but also with their role change. A big example that I see was Giroux's productivity with the puck. Now they brought in Hayes to be like that lead centerman, and now that Frost is another centerman coming up. It really has changed Giroux's way now that because he's aging. They don't want him on the ice as much. They don't want him controlling the puck as much, and they want him to be more of like a crafty veteran. And we both know that that's not who Giroux is.
Yeah.
So just him and Voracek having to learn that new system has been difficult for them. But at the same time, these new call-ups, especially the call-ups during the mid-season like this is the first NHL coach they've ever had. So they're not changing any of their. They're changing some of their ways, but they just think of it as the NHL way, as opposed to Giroux, who has had a lump sum of success in the older style that he has been able to see so far.
And I think like when you have veterans that are kind of aging, you just kind of progressively start to, look at the younger guys to see who's going to replace them. So that shift in attention where you're not paying as much attention to Giroux, Couturier, Voracek, you're looking at Konechny and Lindblom and Farabee and Frost. You're looking at those guys, and you're not necessarily paying as much attention or giving as much stock to the veterans as you might have if they weren't being like outplayed at the moment.
Sure, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And something that I alluded to when I was coming into this segment was the fact that the Flyers, for whatever reason this year, have just loved giving us free hockey. I mean, they I think you see the graphic here. 10 of the first 11 games, they just play 60 minutes.
Yeah.
It's decided then and there. But 7 of the last 10 games, especially 4 out of the last 6 specifically, have been decided by the shootout. And even more surprisingly enough is the fact that the Flyers are winning these shootout games. You know, as big of a deal as it may be or not be, is that a big deal to you guys, the fact that they're pulling out shootout victories?
I think so. I mean, you can see it positively and negatively. Positively, obviously, you're getting more of that experience for come playoff time, but then negatively, it's going to start putting a toll on your players, playing an extra 5 minutes in overtime per night, and then the shootout obviously isn't easier, especially for your goalies. But at the same time, this goalie production from both Hart, who we expected to have a big year, but Elliott, with a little bit of a resurgence kind of year, they both have the same goal allowed per game average of 2.83. And it's just unbelievable that Elliott's been able to come in. He knows his role as the backup behind Hart because Hart's going to be sensational soon. But, I mean, it's just really great to see that you have a confident secondary man like Elliott.
But also in overtime, like, yeah, it's great when they're, you know, in a tie and they're fighting for that win. But when you blow a 3-0 lead against the Islanders, that's when you really don't want the overtime. So I think that it can be seen positively to add to the drama, the suspense of it all, and the fight of it. But when you're blowing a lead and you have to try and desperately protect that, that's when there's a problem with the play.
Yeah, and that Islanders game wasn't necessarily the first instance or the first example where the Flyers win in a shootout because they're just simply winning in a shootout. A couple of these games that we didn't get to recap because we were talking about Sixers last week and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of these Flyers games start out where it's almost opposite of the Eagles, where the Flyers get off to a hot start. They get out to a 2-0, 3-0 lead. And then all of a sudden the game's tied up with a minute left to go in the entire game, and the game has to go to overtime. And that's really where the more concerning things are in terms of just building a lead and not being able to hold on to it.
Yeah, and a catastrophic fall like that for the Flyers, I mean, it does help that this Islanders team is leading the Metropolitan right now and that they really feast on other teams' mistakes. So if you trip up once, I think the first goal was on own side of the ice, territory and turnover. So just being able to fix those mistakes, obviously it's going to come with more experience for these young guys. And it's not as bad as it can be because it was against the Islanders is what I'm trying to say.
So looking ahead, we got a little bit of a tough schedule coming up. I guess really in the NHL, any game that you have coming up is tough because you know, hockey is one of those sports where we see an 8 seed move on all the time. But luckily we get a couple games at home, and it seems as if home, which makes more sense here, is that home is very good to the Flyers. I guess it's really important that they take care of as much business at home. Obviously they want to win on the road, but winning at home has to be one of the top priorities.
Well, yeah, when you're in Philly, like it's expected that you win at home. It's expected that you have that fan support behind you. That's what a lot of teams fear coming to the Wells Fargo Center, you know, because they know that if they're not going to get a beat down from the team, it's going to be from the fans. So taking advantage of that and kind of instilling that reputation of the Wells Fargo Center as a fortress almost, you know, that can be our real advantage this year if we can't get that road game.
Yeah, but just taking care of it at home, obviously it gets you wins here. It will get you home ice in the playoffs, and then that's obviously the main difference for a lot of teams. But coming up to December, this is going to be a huge chance for the Flyers to jump up. They have a lot of home games this December, especially leading up to Christmas. So with a lot of distractions for the players, it's really key for them to stick on track and win those home games to try and get a better position for the playoffs.
And before we go to commercial, I guess I want to ask this every time we talk Flyers because our opinions of them are going to change virtually every day. The last time we talked about them, we really weren't sure where they stood in terms of maybe not long term, but the rest of the season. Do you think this trend that they've been on right now, they're on a 4-game losing streak, they haven't gotten 2 points in a game since a week and a half ago, is it not bad enough to the point where you think they can rebound and secure a playoff spot? I know it's looking far ahead, but I'd like to think that the stretch they had here, they can't have any more of those.
No, definitely not. I feel like they can bounce back. There's still plenty of time, but I think that as long as we don't let it get to us, like, you know, we should be fine for the playoffs.
The Flyers have been notoriously streaky, as we know, so being able to capitalize on more of their positive streaks and end their negative streaks in a quicker fashion will be huge for this team, because right now they're sitting at the second wild card, I believe. I think they definitely have a great chance at taking one of those wild card spots. So we'll obviously see. There's a lot more of the season to come. It all depends on injuries. It all depends on personnel changes. So we'll have to see what this Flyers team can do.
Well, very surprising that you say they hold a second wild card spot, because I really did not expect them to be holding a playoff spot by any means. But again, a lot of hockey to be played, so we'll hope for the best with them. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but don't go anywhere. We have some Eagles talk for you next. Stay tuned.
Did you know that 2 billion people worldwide lack access to safe surgery? Together with Operation Smile, we believe every child suffering from cleft lip or cleft palate deserves exceptional care, no matter where they're born. This is your chance to comfort parents who may have lost hope that surgery is an option for their child. It starts with healing that one child.
Kylie loves to an egg.
An egg?
An egg.
How does a general lose to an egg?
The internet's to an egg.
You know, there is a show for that. It's called Backstage Pass.
See the new library plan?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, they're doing stuff in the library.
Oh. In the library? Yeah. The new library.
You know, there is a show for that called LTV News, where the action never stops.
I wonder how the basketball team.
You know, there is a show for that called SportsTalk.
So are you a Carson Wentz or Nick Foles guy?
More of a Nate Sudfeld team.
Oh, really? Interesting. Wonder where we can hear about Philly sports.
You know, there's a show for that called SportsTalk Philadelphia.
You like Family Feud?
Yeah.
You like all shows like that?
Yeah.
I wonder if LaSalle has a show like that. That'd be kind of cool.
There is a show for that called Q&A.
I really wish that we could just display our talents.
Yeah, me too.
There is a show for that called Explorers Got Talent.
All this and more on LaSalle TV.
Welcome back to Sports Talk Philly here on LaSalle TV. Siobhan Nolan steps off for Eagles Talk, and joining me now is Caleb Flieger and Jim Wister. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to get right into Eagles Talk, and boy, am I not happy. I mean, look, it was going to be a tough game either way. The Eagles lose at home to the New England Patriots, the defending Super Bowl champions, by a score of 17-10. The first quarter went pretty fine, in my opinion. We got the ball to start because the Patriots deferred, and we were able to get a field goal on the board, just like Super Bowl 52 started out. But then from there on out, nothing else resembled what happened in Super Bowl 52. I mean, everything was different from 2 years ago, and I'm looking specifically on the Eagles side. I mean, 10 points, no points after the first quarter. It felt like there were no first downs for the Eagles in the second half. I mean, everything about that game on Sunday could not have gone any more wrong than it did. And there's really not much I can say in terms of looking at the box score and being able to point to a specific stat or like a graphic that points out how bad the Eagles were on Sunday. But after watching Brian Baldinger's breakdowns on Monday, I am ready to feast every bit of anger that I have on this Eagles team. They did not play like they wanted to be there. It's almost like the Patriots cut it to one, a 1 point deficit for them at halftime, and then the Eagles gave up because they knew they were going to score. Please take the floor from me. What do you guys think happened on Sunday?
Well, I'm just going to start as an outside Philadelphia fan to say that it was a 7-point game. So let's not act like they were just blown out of the water by 50 points. But besides that, I thought that the Eagles showed a lot more positive than negative. this wasn't a game they were supposed to win, even though it was at home. They were supposed to win one of these 2 upcoming games to really take control of the NFC East, and they'll obviously have to do that this upcoming Sunday. But coming into it, holding the Patriots to 17 points, only 1 touchdown, and it was on a trick play because Bill Belichick knew that he couldn't have Tom Brady and those guys beat this Eagles defense, which has been their centerfold problem this entire season. I thought was huge. I thought the offense still has problems, but that's just a weapons issue, and it's just they got to run the ball more. But I mean, I'll keep going down the table. I'll take the whole time.
Yeah, I think we all knew it was going to be a long shot to beat the Patriots this week, but I think at the grand scheme of things, the defense looked great. I mean, we allowed the Patriots to 17 points. I thought ever since we got Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby back, the defense has stepped up big time. But the thing that was bad was Carson Wentz looked very confused. I don't know if that was because he didn't have a lot of his weapons out there with him. There's a lot of injuries still, but that was a big negative I saw from the game.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. It's kind of you alluded to. That game kind of made me worry about Carson Wentz now. Like, he's maybe not that franchise guy because, like, you can make the excuses that he doesn't have the weapons and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, great quarterbacks elevate the play of those around them, and he did not do that on Sunday.
Well, go ahead, Tyler.
Well, I was just going to say on that, like, got to fetch him a bone a little bit. He had 50% completion percentage, and it was against the best defense in football. I get where you're coming from, but I think that he definitely still is the front runner guy, but he did look confused out there on Sunday.
Franchise quarterbacks win games like that, and that was a big game, and he just – personally, I just think he underperformed.
Oh, yeah, I'm not agreeing with that, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely underperformed, and like, there's just I guess when we're looking at this issue, right, and we got the lack of receivers and mediocre play from Carson Wentz. This is no longer just individual or you know, like a position problem on the team. This is an Eagles issue. This is an organizational problem, and I don't really understand how we can hope for improved play out of Carson Wentz when, one, we don't have any competent enough healthy receivers, and two, have anyone else that we could have. There was no one else out there that we could have picked up, I guess, right? I mean, I'm just very upset that Carson doesn't have any assistants.
I mean, Antonio Brown is out there. I think that would be a complete disaster. They should not sign him. I don't think they should at all. But, like, I don't know. They picked up Jordan Matthews. Everyone was so excited. He's obviously nothing special. He's not going to help the offense that much, if really at all.
He's a very good WR3.
Yeah.
And right now he's our WR1.
He's decent at best.
And then you add Jay Ajayi, which just seems like they're just pleading for the pass, looking to get somebody that worked in the past. So I don't get either of those moves.
Yeah, I think Howie Roseman just made a big mistake not getting a wide receiver before the trade deadline. I mean, he knew the Deshaun Jackson situation, that was going to be an on-off thing. I mean, and Alshon Jeffrey's been on and off the field too. I mean, I think they just made a big mistake not trying to go out for get another weapon.
Well, now, okay, so I guess as I sit here and I just rage and I complain about the Eagles, I guess the one comforting thing is that we didn't have either Jordan Howard or Alshon Jeffrey from the get-go, and then I don't know at what point in the game we lost him, but Lane Johnson was gone. And if you guys remember 2016, Carson's rookie year, Lane Johnson had that 10-game suspension. We were 3-0 with him, and then we finished the season 7-9. So, I mean, talk about whatever you guys want in terms of the injuries, but I think especially losing Lane Johnson and Jordan Howard, that just killed us.
Yeah, and Lane Johnson was out of that game early, which, I mean, you could obviously tell, but he is huge with that offensive line. We talked about this before the show. The offensive line for the Eagles is the only upper hand on paper that they had over the Patriots. So they really needed to flourish there, and they obviously did not. But it also comes down to Doug Peterson. He's not out of the aim of fire, as I'll say, because you know weeks coming in. Lane Johnson obviously happens in this game, but you know for the weeks coming in who you don't have. You got to start drawing up some different plays, drawing up some different options for Wentz. Even if it's targeting Ertz more, running the ball more, than just going and using the same excuse that they're just depleted.
Yeah, I mean, injuries are just a part of the game of football. It happens all the time. I mean, it's just bad luck that we've had all these injuries, but I mean, still no excuse for players that need to step up. And no one has stepped up on the wide receiver corps, and even when the cornerbacks are out, no one stepped up in the secondary. So I think, I don't know if it's coaching, not getting their guys ready for that next week, but no one's been stepping up.
Yeah.
I think this Lane Johnson injury is very, very problematic for the Eagles. He's one of the best tackles in football, and you need to protect the quarterback for them to have any type of success, no matter who it is back there. It could be Tom Brady. If he does not have time to throw, he's not going to play well. And especially with this game coming up against the Seahawks, Jadeveon Clowney is a beast. So I'm hoping that he clears the concussion protocol and can play this weekend for the Eagles' sake.
Well, one of the big talks about this Eagles team, aside from all of the issues, is their upcoming schedule. And really, the Seattle game that they have is probably the second last tough game that they have on their schedule. I'm looking at that Cowboys game in Week 16, and that's just humongous right there. But looking at that upcoming schedule, do we have enough faith? Does the panel have faith that we're going to pull through here and kind of do what we did last year?
I think we could win out, honestly. I think we are going to be favored in every single one of these games. I mean, we're favored against the Seahawks at home even this week, coming off a loss to the Patriots. I don't know how we are, but we are. But, I mean, if you look at it, all the rest of the teams are below 500 besides the Cowboys. I mean, that's going to be for the division, so it's going to be a big game.
Yeah, I said it last week, and I still stick to it. They could go 0-2 these next 2 weeks, Patriots, Seahawks, and they're still going to win the NFC East because it all comes down to that Cowboys game. And I have no idea. I've said this the entire season. I have no idea how good that Cowboys team is. They've beaten the bad teams. They've looked terrible against the good teams. Well, one of their best games was against the Eagles at home. So going on the road, it's going to be difficult for them, but it all comes down to that game.
That's right. I forgot the game was in New England. They're going to have to win that to see what we really think of them. We're going to move to our scouting reports and picks. Real quick, we all know who we're going to talk about on offense for the Seahawks. It's arguably one of the better, if not the best quarterback of this decade. Russell Wilson, an absolute menace. He's like, there were almost comparisons to Carson Wentz there, or Carson Wentz to Russell Wilson when he first came in. But this is one of the best quarterbacks in football, if not the best. And he's an MVP candidate. So, I mean, I can't look at this defense and say that we're going to contain him.
Oh, yeah, no. Russ is definitely – he would be the MVP if Lamar wasn't having this crazy year that he's having. Yeah. He's obviously going to win it. But Russell is a huge problem, and he can create from outside the pocket, inside the pocket, anything. So what's going to be really big, I believe, is if Avonte Maddox can step up and shut down Tyler Lockett because that is his go-to guy. And he lines up in the slot most of the time. Maddox is always in the slot. They like to run most of their offense through that slot position, so that's going to be a huge matchup for the Eagles this weekend.
What is your guys' opinion on Jadeveon Clowney? And I'm only switching it over because I want to get to our picks at some point, but I want to talk about Clowney because that was another player that the Eagles were sort of in trade talks with or just sign talks, whatever you want to call it. But now he's on the Seahawks. He's having obviously a pretty good season there. With our offensive line struggles from last week, do we think we're going to contain him?
I mean, we had a positive outcome against the Bears with Khalil Mack, so I wouldn't see any problem with. I mean, people just need to step up. Dillard needs to step up if Lane Johnson's out, but if the offensive line produces and protects Carson Wentz, we're going to be successful against him.
Yeah, it'll be difficult. I think that right now, Jadeveon Clowney, is better than Khalil Mack. Just of recent, because Khalil Mack's a beast, but he's had kind of an off season. But Jadeveon Clowney has had an unreal past couple of weeks, including that 49ers game, which the 49ers offensive line was supposed to be this amazing line as well, but they obviously struggled, so the Eagles will have a tough time as well.
All right, well, before we move on to our rants, we're going to talk about our picks, and I am not feeling great about the Eagles this week, but I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout. Again, I see it being as the way I saw it was going to go last week. Close game at first, maybe a bit of a defensive prowess game, an offensive struggle there. But Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson have a connection almost like no other in this league right now. And so I just don't think that's going to be enough for the Eagles to stop. How are you guys feeling with your picks this week?
I have the Seahawks winning by 3 just because I think that Russell Wilson in the fourth quarter is one of the best quarterbacks for bringing his team back. I think they're going to be down early, and they're going to have to come back with them, and Russell Wilson always gets it done.
I have the Eagles by 3. I think the Eagles really step up their game when it's in must-win scenarios, and this is a must-win scenario for them. I mean, I have Miles Sanders win the MVP of that game just because we've seen when the Eagles win games that the run game has been positive and it's been working. So once we get the run game involved, it looks like the Eagles usually win games.
Need to give them the ball.
Sure. And Jim, real quick, your pick.
This week I have the Seahawks winning 28-24. I just don't think the Eagles are going to be able to stop Tyler Lockett. It's as simple as that.
So I guess we're on the same page there with Lockett. But again, we're going to hope for the best with the Eagles. Hopefully they can pull out a victory and make us all feel great for next week. We're going to get into our rants, and I'll start. So just to spoil it for you guys, you're going to hear a lot of complaining about the Eagles. Their O-line, who at one point, 2 years ago, they won whatever name of the award was, best offensive line in football. This year, I don't know how they're ever going to win it again. I understand that we're looking at a historic Patriots defense, but there were multiple plays on Sunday where the offensive line just lost. They just straight up got defeated at the line of scrimmage. And that's why, even though we didn't have Jordan Howard, that's why Miles Sanders didn't have a good game. That's why Boston Scott wasn't going to have a good game. Our running backs don't perform up to their level sometimes. But when our offensive line isn't performing, then everything just goes all right. So I'm pretty pissed about that. But Tyler, we're going to come to you. You're going to stay away from the Eagles and go to college basketball?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the NCAA and how they messed up yet another player conduct. So James Wiseman was suspended for 12 games, and he has to pay $11,500 to a charity of his choice, which is just mind-boggling to me because, A, in the first place, he shouldn't be disciplined at all because this is Penny Hardaway's fault for going in and stepping out of his boundaries, knowing that he was set to be the Memphis head coach. He's ruining the chances for this #1 pick. I think he'll still be the #1 pick, but he's very lucky to get a 12-game suspension. 2, if you're going to stick with something one way or the other. Don't just give a middle ground. I could talk for hours about this, but the NCAA messes it up again.
All right, Caleb, we know what's wrong with the receiving core, but you personally, what's your issue with it?
I mean, injuries have plagued it, obviously, but if we look at some of the stats, I mean, Michael Thomas has 94 catches. The Eagles have 93, all their wide receivers together. They're last in the NFL in yards, they're 31st in catches, and they're 31st in yards a catch. And per Pro Football Focus, Nelson Aguilar is ranked 124th out of 124th receivers who've played 25% of the snaps.
Oh my. Well, stay away from Nelson Aguilar real quick. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, like, what's his deal? Mac Hollins, like, who are we drafting at receiver here?
Yeah, I mean, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, we have a 2nd-round pick that has 3 catches on the year when we could have got DK Metcalf.
I was going to say DK's going to have a game against them
well,
now because he wasn't drafted.
All right, well, Caleb spoke of the devil for Jim's rant topic. Speak about number 13, Jim.
I mean, it's just like kind of embarrassing to watch him at this point. He's just turned into like a meme. Like no one takes him seriously as a receiver anymore. He's just like a joke now. Like it's so bad watching him. How are you a receiver that cannot catch the football? That's their one job, and you just can't do it at all. Like that last play was embarrassing. You
think he really should have caught that?
He should have tracked the ball way better than that. You're a pro receiver. He was running. He had so much room to run under that ball, and he just misplayed that terribly. I remember before the last Super Bowl, my friends were trying to say that Julian Edelman was not as good as Nelson Aguilar. And I just, I wish I could get their opinion now
He's
on that.
He's even a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
But it's not the first time that Aguilar has done that. Like we know that this isn't the first time that he's mistracked the ball. But that's gonna do it for this week's edition of Sports Talk Philly. Make sure you guys check us out on social media. Find us on Twitter at Sports Talk LTV. Look us up on Facebook at facebook.com/SportsTalkPhiladelphia. Also find us on YouTube at LaSalle TV Philly, where you can also find all the other TV shows there. We're going to hope for a victorious Eagles weekend, and Sixers and Flyers, we want them all to do well. We want you guys to tune in next week. Have a good weekend.